So next one we're talking about, Dawn, is number 10 Michigan at Washington, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on NBC. Storyline is very simple. It's a national championship rematch. Last year, obviously, the national title game between Michigan and Washington. Michigan won that game 34-13. Both schools, safe to say, look really different from last year's squads. Obviously, you have two brand new head coaches for both these schools, as Jim Harbaugh left for the Chargers and Kalen DeBoer left for Alabama. So now you got Sharon Moore getting promoted from offensive coordinator to head coach, Jed Fish coming in from Arizona to Washington. It's been a mixed bag so far for Michigan and Washington. Michigan suffered their first regular season loss in 3 years a few weeks ago to Texas that we were actually at. But then they made their way back into the top 10 by beating number 11 USC a couple weeks ago. Washington off to just a 3-2 start this season. They've lost to Washington State and Rutgers so far. But even so, even though Washington is unranked and only 3-2 on the season, and even though Michigan is number 10 in the country, Washington is favored at home against the Wolverines. So I'm excited to see this national title game rematch, and it'll look completely different from last year's game probably.
Yeah, it's kind of weird to see Michigan as an underdog in this spot. It makes you. It's one of those ones where it makes you think they know something, right? I don't know if they know something we don't know we're recording this on a Tuesday, but it seems odd. Because I know Michigan's had their struggles.
It's the weirdest spread of the week, I think.
It is.
Yeah.
And Michigan's had their struggles, obviously the quarterback stuff, but they're leaning into Alex Orji in the run game and just running the ball constantly, right? And, the big win against USC. Last week, a tight win against Minnesota. But, I mean, Minnesota's not horrible either. That's a competitive team with a good defense, and they're good in the trenches. I mean, it feels odd, especially with Washington coming off a loss to Rutgers, right? So I think – I don't know if they know something we don't know, but we're gonna analyze it as we always do, and we'll see what we have for the picks here. But it's an odd feel to see that. Is it just a West Coast trip thing too?
Might be
going out to Seattle and having to play that game.
It's not that far, right? It's not like
from Michigan.
From Michigan, it's a little far, but it's not like a cross country like the next game we're talking about, Miami and Cal, right?
I mean, kind of. It's still 3 time zones. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's still far.
I mean,
it is far.
It's not like they're playing at 9 a.m. either.
No,
so
true,
it is that. But I mean, it just something about it. It feels weird.
Weird. It's very weird.
Yeah.
I don't know why this spreads like this. We'll get into the scores later, but yeah. So what? Tell me about you have the Washington offense in this one. So what should we be looking out for when the Huskies have the ball?
There's been a lot of question marks with Michigan, right? It's kind of the thing we came into the year kind of guessing and figuring out, okay, what do we still have from last year? What can our new guys do? What can a new quarterback do? And all the new stuff on offense and replacing NFL players and doing all that. But there is one constant, and that is their defensive line. And it still may be the best defensive line in the country, especially their front four when you talk about Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Derek Moore, and Josiah Stewart. Doesn't get much better than that.
3 first-round picks on D-line.
3 first-round picks, and Derek Moore is getting drafted too at some point. If it's not first round, he's getting drafted. And look, you look at their defensive line, overall grade, they're 4th, run D grade, they're 10th. Best pass rush grade in the country from a defensive line, 4th most sacks, 8th in pass rush win rate. This is the unit, especially I think over the last 2 weeks. We saw it in that USC game. They were just dominant. This is the unit that takes games over, and they allow their offense chances to run the ball and work the ball downfield and score just enough points. They've gotten 27 points in each of the last 2 weeks. And then secondary still got, obviously, with Will Johnson hanging out back there. Don't throw at him. I mean, I don't know when they'll learn not to throw at him, but Texas learned it, and they beat Michigan. So either way, you got a defensive line that is the constant, and this is the best set of players for Michigan. Okay, you look at Washington's offensive line. All the hype was about losing Michael Penix and the receivers and the head coach, right? 5 new starters on the offensive line, and they're still kind of waiting for it to gel all the way. Okay, and I mean, look, right now, 89th. In the country in overall grade. Their offensive line with a 63.4 overall grade. And if you bring that down, if you take out 2 games against non-Power 5 teams, it's like 102nd. And they're 120th in run blocking. And look, Jonah Coleman's really, really good. We saw him at Arizona last year, and he's awesome for Washington this year. One of the best backs in the country. But you got to find a way to block against a team like this. And look, their last 3 games, they've lost 2 of them, scored 24 points or less. So if we've got a low-scoring game here, who does this favor? Michigan.
Yeah.
That's the game they want to play, is 24 points or less, right? So, look, it's going to be a problem. It is going to be a problem between Jonah Coleman trying to find holes and Will Rogers. Look, the one thing that's kind of holding up Washington's pass protection, even though they're still trying to gel, is Will Rogers gets rid of the ball really quickly. 2.48 second average time to throw. One of the fastest in the country, okay? But at some point, you have to block people. And these are the people for Michigan that you have to block. And if you can't do it, they're going to take the game over. So that's really the matchup I'm watching is Washington with, again, 5 new starters on the offensive line. Yes, they're playing their 6th game together, but it's still not gelling, I don't think, the way that Jed Fish wants it to. And now they're playing arguably the best defensive line in the country.
Yeah, definitely. And other side of the ball, I mean, so you got Jonah Coleman, who's probably going to be really relied on as Washington's, main source of offense is Jonah Coleman. But they could also throw the ball a little bit. Michigan is really relying on that run game, and that's it, honestly. So my matchup to watch is, can Washington make Alex Orji win as a passer in obvious passing situations? Can they get Michigan behind the chains, honestly, in this one? So Michigan a couple weeks ago made the switch to Alex Orji from Davis Warren at quarterback, and since then, they've been completely reliant on their run game. Michigan has run the ball on 65.5% of their plays over the last 2 weeks. Only Iowa has a higher rate in the Power 4. We've already went over how reliant Iowa is on Caleb Johnson. Michigan is right behind them in run rate over the last 2 weeks. And we're talking about close games, too. We're talking about games where Michigan feasibly should be throwing the ball. Like that USC game, they had a 2-minute drill on their own, 20-yard line, and they still ran the football.
Down 4 points?
Yeah, down 4, and they needed to get down the field, and they're like, no, we're still running the football. And luckily, Kalel Mullings broke off that 60-yard run, and obviously they scored the touchdown on a 4th and goal to win that game. And speaking of Kalel Mullings, he has been the star for Michigan's offense this year. Donovan Edwards was on the cover of EA College Football 25, and we did a great interview with him, and we love Donovan Edwards. But Kalel Mullings has been the lead back for the Wolverines this year. Currently 8th in the country in rushing yards at 540 and 9th in the country in yards after contact at 363. Right now, Washington does lead the Power 4 in tackling grade at an 82.3, but they've been pretty average in run defense overall. Right now, they're 67th in the country in EPA per run, and they are 57th in the country with 4.5 yards allowed per carry. So if Michigan can stay ahead of the chains, they're going to win this game. But if Orji is forced into obvious passing situations, that opens a door for the Huskies, because right now Alex Orji has the 5th worst passing grade in the Power 4 this year at a 53.4 mark. So if you make him throw a lot in this one, that significantly favors the Huskies. But if you allow Kalel Mullings to run all over you, that's where Michigan should win this game.
I will give Sharon Moore and Michigan credit, because we had this quarterback controversy. At one point, it was a 5-man competition. Yep. Then it was down to 2. It was down to Davis Warren and Alex Orji. And at the very least, okay, they tried Warren. They tried to get a true passing game going. Didn't work, okay? If you're going to play a guy like Alex Orji, just lean into it.
Yep.
Right? Lean into it, and we've got 3 rushing threats in Orji and Mullings and Edwards, and just go all the way and see how far you can take it, because the reality set in very quick that they just don't have a passing game this year.
Yep.
And once in a while they'll get the ball to Colson Loveland, and once in a while they'll run some RPOs, but that's it. So look, play to your identity, and their identity is playing defense and running the football as much as possible. And honestly, I know you mentioned it against USC. They had enough time to keep trying to run the football until they never had to throw the football after the big run. But as long as they don't get down 2 scores, keep at it.
Yeah,
just keep hitting the gas and keep letting your defense play.
So, Dawn, in the most surprising spread of the week is Washington favored by 2.5 or 3 points, wherever you look at right now. Do you agree with that? Do you think Washington at home beats a top 10 team in Michigan, or will Michigan once again beat Washington?
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to find something out in the days leading up to this game that we should know about, or something surprising that's going to come along. But I have to take Michigan in this game. I just think their defense, of the 4 units on the field, their defense is the best one. And look, Washington has good players. I think their secondary is good. Their coverage unit's good, but I don't think that matters as much in this game. Jonah Coleman's really good. We know that. Will Rogers is at least solid. He's reliable at quarterback, but I think it takes a different level of quarterback to really, when you talk about trying to shred this Michigan defense, especially with Will Johnson sitting out there, and this pass rush. I just think it just feels off to me. I just feel like I kind of have to pick Michigan here, don't I? I just think their defensive line can take over this whole game. I really do. I just in the trenches, and look, not only are they running the ball better, they're starting to run block a little bit better. They're at least getting in the groove, and their linemen can lean forward and get into the run game. But I have Michigan 24-13. I just think their defense is the best unit on this field.
Yeah, I'm with you. I have a 28-14 in this one. And I mentioned before in our storyline breakdown how, it's a rematch of the national title game, but these two teams are completely different than last year. Ironically, I think it'll be very similar to the national title game. I think Michigan's run game is going to dominate, just like it did in the national title game last year. And the defense for Michigan is going to be too much for Washington to handle, just like it was last year in the national title game as well. So even though they're completely different, two different teams, I think it'll look a lot like the national title game. And Washington fans probably having PTSD from that national title game.
Certainly with Mason Graham sitting in there in the middle.
Oh, yeah.
That was a dominant player in that game, and that's one of the few guys that's really returning here.
Definitely. So we both have Michigan in an upset, I guess, if you want to call it, beating Washington. But we'll get into our upset picks later. But that one, if we didn't preview this game, Dalton, I think you and I and Eli probably have been sprinting to try to get the Michigan one before anyone else.
We'd be fighting over it for sure. Yeah.